Amen. Amen. So we've been on this series now for a few weeks, and I don't believe I've actually spoken probably about 6 weeks. Ryan's had to really hit it pretty hard here lately. But he had given me the opportunity to talk on a Wednesday night series, and then I had a chance to preach again this past weekend, so he's been doing a lot of, it's not real easy for me to work in multiple messages in a week, so I appreciate him taking over there. But we've almost come to the end of this book we've been doing, End of Me. I believe there's only one chapter left after this, so kind of a conclusion. But we've been looking at different topics each and every week, and this week it's an interesting topic because it's something that I don't think we like to talk about like a lot of the topics we've covered on this, and it's weak to become strong. And I think we can all agree that as we've grown up, we're all taught and people lay on our lives that we have to be strong, that we have to build ourselves up, that we have to make our own way, we have to do our own thing. But Jesus' teaching is exactly the opposite of that. He works best in us when we're our weakest and when we conceal ourselves over to Him. So tonight we're going to kind of be looking at that idea of weak to become strong. And I've got it kind of set up just as a little bit laid back tonight. We've been pretty talkative so far, and hopefully we have a chance to maybe all kind of stay engaged and be talkative as we go through. But the very first question I've got on your sheet is the most dreaded interview question if you've ever had a job interview before. And it's, how would you answer the question, what are your greatest strengths and weaknesses? Anybody?
Talking.
Is that a strength or a weakness?
Which one? A strength. Well, what's a weakness? Talking too much? What else?
You know, you could like the weaknesses that are really strengths. You know, I work too hard, I care too much. And you have
He's reading my notes. See, the Michael Scott approach. If you've ever are an Office fan, Michael Scott goes to interview for the big corporate position, and they ask him this question, and he says, "I work too hard, I care too much, and sometimes I can be too invested in my job." And he says, "Okay, well, what are your strengths?" And he said, "Well, my weaknesses are actually strengths." And unfortunately, that's the way we want to carry ourselves a lot, right? We want to talk about our weaknesses are really our strong points, because we like to talk about how good we are, or how strong we are, or how much we can carry ourselves, or what we can accomplish. But we really don't want to talk about where we're weak, or where we struggle, or where we have issues, or doubts, or fears. We don't want to talk about that. We don't want to discuss that because we don't want to come off as someone that has problems. We want to become off as someone who has it all together, who has it all figured out. But God's Word tells us that it's only in those weaknesses that He can actually become, or actually use His power through us. It's only when we're weak and at that point. So that's where we're kind of going to spring off tonight. And there's two different parts of Scripture that we're going to look at tonight. But the main one is in 2 Corinthians, in the 12th chapter, the first 10 verses. And I'll kind of set it up for us here before we read it. It's on the back of your sheet if you've got a sheet. If not, I'll be reading out of the CSB here in just a minute. But to kind of set this up, I wish sometimes, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but I wish sometimes they had like a sarcasm font, like if you're on Facebook, Twitter, so you could tell when people are being sarcastic. And I think if you had a sarcasm font, the first few verses of this right here, Paul's speaking from a pretty sarcastic level right here. He's speaking to the church at Corinth, who have become an extremely wealthy, powerful church, and they basically turned their back on God's teaching and started kind of propping themselves up, boasting in their own way, boasting in what they've accomplished, talking about how great they are, and just basically leaving God out of the picture. And he's kind of rebuking them here as we begin this part of the Scripture. And as we read, you can kind of see and catch up on where he's at. But his main goal is to show them, as he goes through this, that all the things that they're proclaiming about the greatness that they've done is actually nothing that they've accomplished. And the reason their church has quit growing and the church is not reaching people anymore is because they've quit leaning on God's strength and they're trying to lean on their own strength. So if we look at it, beginning in the first verse, it says, "Boasting is necessary," sarcasm, It is not profitable, but I will move on to visions and revelations of the Lord. I know a man in Christ who was caught up in the third heaven 14 years ago. Now, who's this man he's talking about? He's talking about himself. Now, he doesn't reveal that, but that's who he's talking about. Whether he was in the body or out of the body, I don't know. God knows. I know that this man, whether in the body or out of the body, I don't know. God knows. Was caught up into paradise and heard inexpressible words which a human being is not allowed to speak. I will boast about this person, but not about myself, except of my weaknesses. So Paul's basically saying, all y'all are boasting about all these great things you've done. Well, I can boast about something I did 14 years ago that's tremendously better than anything that any of y'all have done here if you want to start boasting. But it's not worth anything. It's not going to get you anywhere. So he continues on forth. I want to boast. I wouldn't be a fool because I'd be telling the truth. But I will spare you so that no one can credit me with something beyond what he sees in me or hears from me, especially because of the extraordinary revelations. Therefore, so that I would not exalt myself, a thorn in the flesh was given to me. Anybody ever heard the saying, you're a thorn in my side? That's where this actually comes from. Paul's basically telling us that in his boasting, and in that is when his pride wells up and he begins to boast, he's reminded of the way that God has changed his life by the thorn that God has left in his side that he can't get over without God's help. He says, a messenger of Satan to torment me so that I would not exalt myself. Concerning this, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it would leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness. Therefore, I will most gladly boast all the more about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may reside in me. So I take pleasure in weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and in difficulties for the sake of Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. It's a very powerful word, as Paul's saying, that all these great things that he could boast about are worth nothing. Because all he really wants to boast about is all of the struggles that he goes through, because that's when God's power is really revealed. And that's when God's power is really revealed in our lives, is when we start just working through the struggles and working through the difficulties and working through the tough times and the tough days and laying that back to God and allowing him to work through that in his power and his might. So we'll see 4 different things tonight, talking about how God's strength is displayed to us through all these different struggles we have in our life. And the first thing we see is God's strength is displayed in our imperfections. In our imperfections. So how's God's strength made perfect in our weaknesses? Anybody got any ideas on that? Any thoughts on that? It's a pretty heavy question.
Well, I think it lets us know we can't do it on our own.
True.
Too much for us to do.
True. True. What else? Anybody else got any thoughts? So how often do we see in our day and time the Instagram post or the social media post? I saw a post the other day that was just so great. It was a person, and they had posted on their Instagram that they were in the front row courtside of a basketball game. Okay? And their post looks like they're there, and they're portraying the fact that they've got this perfect setup. They've achieved so much that they're sitting courtside at this basketball game. And it pans out, and somebody shows behind, and they're actually standing in front of their TV, and that the way they've manipulated the camera actually makes it look like they're there. But they're not there. They're just sitting at home. They're watching it just as ordinary as me and you are watching it at home. But they want people to perceive the fact that they're so good and that they've accomplished so much that they're actually sitting on the front row of this game. We see it so often well, I see it, I guess, because I've got kids, but we see it a lot in the Pinterest posts, what I call the super moms or the extra moms, the ones that, make the little treat for every everything that happens. You know, it's Tuesday, so let's just make something that's just crazy and doesn't make any sense, you know. But they portray this perfection. And normally it's because they're trying to cover up an imperfection in their life. It's because they're trying to cover up something that's imperfect that they don't want to deal with. So, and instead of dealing with the struggle, they portray themselves as being perfect for everyone else to see. And it's the same struggle that we all go through. It says when we try to live perfect, we eliminate God's ability to live and work through us. We eliminate His ability to actually strengthen us and actually take us forward in life because we're trying to live perfect when we cannot be perfect. We can only be made perfect when He lives through us. But we see so often that that's not the case. That's the way we go about carrying ourselves in life is we try to portray that we have it all together, that we never mess up, that everything's always in line for us, that everything always falls into place. And then when stuff actually does fall into place, we want to glorify ourselves for it instead of glorifying God for actually helping us through that. So we see that first thing we see is that God's strength is displayed in our imperfections. Then we also see that God's strength overcomes our shortcomings. It overcomes our shortcomings. So what flaws in your life can God use to prove His power? I mean, now this is the part where you got to say you got some weaknesses. I mean, you got to be honest here. And some of us may not want to be honest, but...
I would say my handicap.
Sure.
Just because
Sure.
a lot of people on my side aren't as outgoing and joyful about it. So.
Well, a lot of people use it as an excuse to not do things. Right? What else? Anybody? A few years back, we went to a men's conference up in Nashville when they still had it at the Municipal Auditorium. It's been probably 3 years ago. You may have been with us, Ryan. I can't remember. Some of y'all may have been in here. But the keynote speaker on Friday night was a guy that I'd never heard of. And I can't pronounce his name very well. His name's Nick, and it's got a V and a U and a J and a couple of C's in there. I mean, it's just really difficult. Vujicic, I guess is his name. I don't know. I can't pronounce his name. I broke this too while I'm at it, so it's all good. Sorry, Matt. I'll get you next week on that. My bad. My bad. I'll get you next week on that, Matt. We're getting a new one anyway, so it'll all work. But anyway, so he is an Australian pastor, right? Okay. Christian motivational speaker. And he was born with a disease called tetra amelia syndrome. I can't pronounce it. My wife hates the pronunciations. I should have let her come up here and read the pronunciations because she's much better at that. Anyway, he was born without any arms or legs. He has no arms. He has no legs. He has a little flipper. That's all he's got. And they brought out a table on the stage, just like a table that's sitting right here. And they brought him in and they put him on this table. And I'm just going to tell you, when I saw it, I'm like, I don't know what's fixing to happen here. I mean, it was, and I'm talking, dude just laid it all out there. I mean, he just preached it like you hadn't heard it preached before. He was using it humorously. He could use it making jokes about himself. But he was married, he's still married, has a family. And most people would have looked at him and said, he has nothing to give. What can he do? He can't walk. He has to be carried everywhere he goes. People have to take care of everything that he does. But he, instead of trying to live like that, chose to use that, allow God to use his weaknesses and his struggles for his glory. And what we find out is that God can use those flaws and those struggles to still proclaim his glory to everybody that you come in contact with. So instead of trying to hide behind the flaws or hide behind the struggles or hide behind what maybe is not perfect in your life, maybe it's time to kind of lean in, as some of our people's favorite phrase is, lean into those struggles and shortcomings, lean into those flaws, and allow God to start working through those. Anybody got any thoughts on that? I'm trying to be more conversationally here. As we go. Ryan, you got something there? You look like you're studying on it.
If we always put up that strong appearance, we don't give the opportunity for us to show others how God is working in our life, because even if it's not true, we make it like we have it all together, and that doesn't give glory to God, because we can't, and it paints a false picture of what it means to be a Christian. And I think that's why a lot of people don't live for Jesus as much, because the Christians they know in their life don't ever talk about their shortcomings. And so it paints a false picture of what it means to follow Jesus. And so if we're willing to admit that we're weak and where we fall short, but then how God has gotten us through that, or how we're still in the middle of it but He's working through it, then we're showing the world that we're no different than them, except for the fact that we have Jesus in our life. And we got the same junk the world's got, but God is helping us work through that. But if we're never willing to show others our shortcomings, then we're really not showing others how God will work through our lives, and how He has the opportunity and the ability to forgive us and pick us up and use us even in the middle of that weakness.
And that's exactly right. If we continue to portray when we go out, or when you go out to maybe talk to someone who's a non-believer, or talk to somebody who maybe is new to the Christian faith or whatever, if you go out into that from this position of continuous strength and don't reveal that you've had struggles in your own life, then it's hard for them to relate to what you're actually telling them. Because you're coming from a position of power when really you don't have power. God's power is in your life. And it's difficult for people in those times sometimes to understand it if you're not showing a little bit of the scar, showing a little bit of the difficulty, showing a little bit of the struggle, right? Anybody else have anything on that?
Yeah, people can tell when you're being engineering, even if you're not picking up on it,
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean you have to tell them about your personal life.
Sure.
But in conversations I've had with people, even not necessarily bad conversations, bad too, but maybe also just talking to someone at the grocery store or whatever. People can tell,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes a lot further when you're being genuine, and you don't have to feel like when you're just being real and you're not trying to, like you said, cover yourself up. You just actually enjoy life.
That's right.
Enjoy the moment,
That's right.
I think that's something that we need to all remember.
Sure. No doubt. So we see God's strength displayed in our imperfections. We see Him overcome our shortcomings. And next we see that God strengthens us through our vulnerability. Through our vulnerability. So this question's not on there, but because I figured everybody would probably give the same answer. But who likes to put themselves out there and be vulnerable? Anybody. Does anybody like to do this? I hate it. I'm going to be real honest with you. I hate being vulnerable. I hate actually putting myself out there. And I hate not knowing how to do something. I hate it. I do. I'll never forget the first time I went back to the gym. I hadn't been to the gym in years. I went and it was like 5 a.m. and I'm like, I'm fixing to go in here and really do something, right? So I get on this machine and I've got no idea how it works. But I'm going to look like I do, right? So I get on it trying to do it, and it's just like, it's moving one way, and I'm trying to move the other way, and it's just not going. And some dude comes over there and helps me. Of course, I was so angry that I didn't even want him to help me. Because I'm like, I can do this. I can figure this out. I don't need you to help me. So, and then like the next 2 months I went, I would never use that machine. And I knew how to use it, but he had made me so mad because he showed me how to use it and I didn't want him to, that I wouldn't use it anymore.
You don't like for anybody to tell you that.
Because I don't like anybody to tell me what to do. Ask my wife. We don't fight a whole lot, but most of the time we fight because she tells me what to do and I don't like it. She tells me how to drive or tells me how I should do something and I don't like it.
I don't go to the gym.
True story. Because
Was she the man? that
she was
showed
not
you?
the man. No, but now, the last time we did go to the gym, she did correct me on something and I told her just to leave me alone, that I was doing it my way. I was being, in there. So,
I thought you were going to sort of have contacts.
no, that's another good story too.
Probably because you were right.
Yes, that's another good story. Since you bring it up, I'll just tell it because we've got time. I mean, we're just hanging out here. So, so I've been wearing contacts now for about 14 months. And I wore glasses. I should have been wearing glasses for about 10 years, and I only wore them for about 2 years. Because the first 8 years, I refused to believe that I needed glasses.
Because you didn't want anybody to tell you.
Because they might tell me I was wrong. So I went 8 years of not seeing a lot of stuff really good because I'm serious. You think God can't use you in the street here? I was not vulnerable. I did not want to be there. Okay, so I finally started wearing my glasses, and going through there, and I got tired of that. And I was like, I want to get some contacts. Now, I've never wore contacts, and I've never been around that. My wife, she was blind as a bat as a kid, so she wore contacts for years before she got LASIK eye surgery. And so she knew everything there was to know about contacts. But I refused to believe that I wasn't smart enough to put something in my eye. I mean, literally that's all it was. You just put it in your eye. That's all you got to do.
It's a little harder than that.
It's a little harder than that, I found out. But at the time, I believed that was all there was to it. So we were getting ready for church one morning, and I had been struggling for about 40 minutes trying to put a contact in my eye. Just over again. It would not go in there. I was very upset. So she came in and she started telling me all the things I was doing wrong. And this just made me more angry. I didn't want to lean on her because she wanted to help me. And guess what I said? I don't want your help because I want to be able to do it myself. I don't want your help. So I fumbled around and finally got the contact out. So I went and I took a shower. I was in the shower and I started noticing that I could see pretty good out of this side, but I couldn't see nothing. Nothing. So I got out and I said, I've lost my contact. I said, one of these is fallen out that I've got in there. And I got to looking and I put both my contacts inside. Yes. I had taken and put one in.
You didn't get to look in.
You looked inside. That's right. I had you on the ground looking for it because I lost it. That's right. And then I said, no, how could it be in my eye? It took me 45 minutes to get one in my eye. But somehow I had managed to get both of them on my finger and put them both in my eye. In all of my struggles.
You did it right.
I got it right halfway, 45 minutes later.
Was your vision really good?
My vision was just the same in this one. It was just the same.
I'm just saying, how do I know if it's in there? I'm like,
I don't know. I didn't know.
like it's going to be weird.
It's very difficult. I'm happy to say that I have successfully mastered the art of putting a contact in now, though. So anyway, yeah. So but the key is, no one likes to be vulnerable. No one likes to be corrected. No one likes to admit that they're wrong. No one likes to admit that they need help. No one does. Do they?
To an extent.
To an extent?
Right? Not as stubborn as you.
Yeah. Probably true. But it says vulnerability is a two-edged sword. It cuts both ways. Because when we're most vulnerable, that's when we're most laid out there to get hurt. Right? And the truth is, I got this off of a little blog I was reading, but it says the truth is, you aren't really being vulnerable if you can't get hurt in the process. And I thought that was so true. Because when you really open yourself up, and when you really let yourself go, or you really open yourself up to somebody or to God, there's a chance you're going to get hurt in the process. And it's going to be in the hurt when you're going to start working and His strength's going to be displayed. You know? We always want the strength on the mountaintop, but we got to have the strength when we're in the valley. When we're going through that struggle, when we're going through that time when life is just not going right. When the struggle is there, when the difficulty is there, when the relationships have broken down, that's when the strength from God really shines out and really gets us through the next spot. So we see that God works in our imperfections, He overcomes our shortcomings, He strengthens us through our vulnerability. And finally, we see that God strengthens ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Ordinary people to do extraordinary things. All throughout the Bible, every story that you read, every parable, everything that you see, it's never God using the person that's got the most talent, or maybe that's been born into the most privilege, or maybe that's achieved the most. It's always the ordinary person. The person that's willing to admit that they don't have it all together. The person that's willing to admit that the struggles in their lives prevent them from actually doing what God's called them to do. But if they'll lay those struggles over to Him and let Him work through them, then He can achieve the glory for it, not themselves. I mean, you look at the disciples, you know, ordinary people, fishermen, tax collectors. You look at these ordinary people. You look at even Jesus when He was born. Right? Now, God could have picked any person He wanted to. He could have sent Him to the richest kingdom in the world. He sent Him to ordinary people, born in an ordinary way, in a manger, no less. Because it was that sign of showing that even the Son of God needed God's strength to actually get through. I told a story in the book, and I thought it was so good, about a Russian woman who was very well versed in multiple languages, knew English, knew some other languages, things of that nature. Come on in here, Phil. Bring us in the snacks, because everybody loves a good snack. We love snacks, Phil. Appreciate you. You're the best.
You start serving hot coffees when I start coming.
Okay, well, we'll bring the Keurig back out. You can come on over, see. We'll get you a hot coffee in there. Pretty good stuff. Thank you, Phil. That's right. So he tells a story of this lady, Russian lady, and she is extremely sick with multiple sclerosis. Okay? It has destroyed her entire body. She can't do anything. She can't get up. She can't walk. Her husband is taking care of her 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Okay? She's being propped up. He props her up with pillows and everything else just so she can sit up in the bed. The only thing she has that works is her index finger, one finger on one hand. That's the only thing she has control over. She has control over nothing else. And a guy comes in and he wants to pray for her. And he wants to pray that God will heal her of all these struggles and all these flaws and all these weaknesses that she has. And her husband says, well, let me tell you, she uses that finger about 12 to 14 hours a day, typing word for word the Bible from English to Russian. Because the Bible is outlawed in Russia. You can't get a hand of it. It's illegal. They'll kill you on the spot if they see somebody translating. She translated, and nobody looks at her because they think she's not worth anything. She's not worth her time. She's of no value. She can do nothing because she can only move one finger. But because of that, she is actually translating the Bible into Russian, and the Bible is actually being passed out and produced all throughout the country of Russia all because of her. Because God is using her weaknesses in our struggle for His strength and His glory. He said, so don't pray for her to be healed from that. Pray for her to continue to be able to do what God's called her to do. And continue to be able to go out and to go forward doing the things that He's called her to do. And I just thought that was so fitting, because so often in our prayer, we want God to remove all of the weaknesses we have. We want God to remove all the struggles that we have. We want Him to make all the paths open and clear and easy. And we forget that maybe sometimes His best work is actually just done in our weaknesses. And our weaknesses that define us is actually what God uses the most to strengthen us. Philippians 4:11 through 13, it's just a great, great word. It says, I don't say this out of need, for I've learned to be content in whatever circumstances I find myself. I know both how to make do with little and how to make do with a lot. In any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being content, whether fed or hungry, whether in abundance or in need. I am able to do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I know that's a quoted verse. I know that's a verse that everybody knows. But it's such a true testament for us as we go forward tonight. No matter the weakness, no matter the struggle, no matter what's falling apart or what is not there, God works in that weakness for us. And it's not until we realize that our weakness is where He makes us strong that we'll actually be able to truly go forward in boldness and confidence in doing what God's actually called us to do. There's a song, and I wanted to close with this because when I read this chapter and I started looking at it, the song popped into my head, and I hadn't heard this song in years. It's an older worship song. It's a hill song. It says, what the Lord has done in me. Some of y'all probably heard this song. But, I mean, we've sang this years and years and years ago at the church I went to back when we went to Greater Life. We used to sing the song all the time. But the opening chorus says, let the weak say, I am strong. Let the poor say, I am rich. Let the blind say, I can see. It's what the Lord has done in me. And I just thought that was so true, because, we may be weak, but He makes us strong. We may not be poor. We may be poor in our spiritual life, but He makes us rich in what we go through. We may not be able to see what He can open our eyes to see, the struggles. So, has anybody here ever truly experienced God's power taking over your weaknesses? That's a heavy-handed question. That's a question that may not be one that we want to share publicly. Maybe something that we want to keep more to ourselves. But that's something I want you to think about. What area where you maybe were weak, but you started allowing God to work through that, and He actually started using a weakness that you have as a strength for Him to go out and actually do what He's called you to do. And think about that. Meditate on that this week as you go forward. So, a great word tonight just on how our weaknesses are actually can be used for strength from God. So.